Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Run the Nation right here. TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Oh man, it's Tuesday, feels like a Monday. Haven't been on since Thursday. Long weekend, very much needed. Boy, it was nice to have a sanity break away from politics. So that's why you guys didn't hear from me over the weekend. I know I said maybe I'll do like a stream or two or a game stream. No, couldn't even get there. My wife was sick. We had a whole bunch of holiday travel to do. And I wanted to stay the hell away from politics so that I could come back tanned, rested, and ready. And I'm here all except for the tanned. So that was my weekend. Hopefully you guys had a good holiday as well and enjoyed yourself and did not get, into any altercations on Black Friday, which I did not participate in because I think, I don't know. I think there's more important things to life than getting into fights with your fellow human beings over a television, over like a cheap TV. I know, right? I didn't even do Cyber Monday, so I don't do any of that. Mainly because I don't have a lot of money, but still, nonetheless, it was great to actually not do things. Because normally I'm busy, I'm go, right? Taking the weekend, other than, doing the family travel, which I love my family. I love both sides, all sides of the family, etc. Still, it's nice to be away from people. A lot of you might not know this, and it might not be super apparent, but I'm actually a very introverted person, which means I like to have my time alone. And being around, I guess doing what I do, being around people, is kind of draining to me. Like, I love this show. I love doing this. I love giving you guys the news and talking about it and doing analysis, but it also is pretty draining. So, doing that, like, it's good to get away and it's good to have like a little break, especially for your sanity, because we live in very insane times. And so any little bit of a break is sorely needed. But nonetheless, it's Tuesday. We've got a lot of news. I'm back, and we're going to have a great show, guys. So stick around for this. We'll talk about, of course, GM, the recent cuts going on here. We also have the border, whatever. Whatever's going on in the border. Of course, complete insanity from insane people. And then we've got Fox News on that same insanity. We've got Trump on the climate change report. We'll talk about that a bit. And we also have another good guy with a gun that was shot and killed by police. You're going to be shocked who that is and why that happened. So we'll talk about that. That's a horrible story. It's pretty horrific, and entirely preventable. Entirely preventable, and that's like the worst thing about it. But okay, now let's start out the show with some economic news. Very disastrous stuff, and without further ado, here comes the horror. Now, back when the Republicans were trying to pass their gigantic tax cuts for corporations and for wealthy individuals, they claimed that, hey guys, it's all going to work out okay because we're going to have jobs. There's going to be lots of jobs. They're going to create more jobs. There's going to be more pay. There's going to be more bonuses, etc. Now, it's almost been about a year since Trump's tax plan actually went into effect. So what's happening in the economy? Well, specifically manufacturing. Now, that's something that President Trump has said that he's very concerned about. Like, oh, I want to have more jobs in manufacturing. I want us to make more things again. Well, a year after those tax cuts went into effect, you have thousands of workers now in manufacturing, in that same sector, who were promised new jobs, more pay. They're actually now looking at unemployment. Now, recently, GM announced a massive restructuring plan, right, in which the company will inevitably cut about 15% of its workforce. They also said that they plan on laying off approximately 14,300 employees. That's about 15%, shuttering 5 factories in both the U.S. and Canada, and that 2 more closings will also be announced internationally. So restructuring, basically, we all know what that means. Somebody's losing their job. In this case, a lot of people are losing their jobs. And guess where this is happening? Mostly in the Midwest. Now, of course, that one plant in Canada is in Ontario. So you have Ohio, Michigan, Maryland, Ontario, and 2 more places that are going to end up being closed internationally. Now, if you're in the Midwest, I don't know, do you guys feel like you're winning yet? Because I certainly don't feel like I'm winning. I live in Michigan, so what happens in the auto industry has a big impact on the state's economy. GM pulling out, closing factories. Oh boy. Now, how does this relate to the tax cuts? Why do I keep bringing it back to that? Well, it's because the GOP gave a $514 million tax break to the company after passing these tax cuts, right? Now, the company, according to the advocacy group Not One Penny, used about $100 million of that to enrich GM's shareholders. Well, now, wait a minute. So we're closing plants all over the Midwest and in Canada, getting rid of a lot of workers, nearly 15,000 employees, and yet they took that money and they gave it to their shareholders. They gave it to the executives. Oh, here you go. Here's all this money that we saved in the tax cuts. Now, wait a minute. You shouldn't do that, right? Well, unfortunately, in our system, that actually makes a lot of sense because shareholder profits right now are incentivized over everything else. There is no incentive in our corporate structure right now to care about workers. Well, they see workers as nothing more than, oh, you're easily replaceable. You're actually a drain on the company, so let's just get rid of you. We're going to restructure, and we're going to focus on, of course, short-term profits. Look, that's why pay didn't rise significantly, right? That's why there were very few new jobs created as a result of those tax cuts. They took the tax cuts and they put it in their pocket. That's what the executives do, and that's what the system has incentivized, right? The company has a fiduciary responsibility to squeeze as much profit as it can out of the company and hand it right to the shareholders. Now, I don't necessarily blame the CEO, because think about it. If the CEO does that, or I'm sorry, doesn't do that, they don't squeeze out every single bit of profit and give it to the shareholders, well, then the shareholders fire the CEO and replace them with someone who will. Because that is the corporate culture. And that is also what's wrong with the corporate culture. And it's been like that since greed apparently became good. Right? Now, I have more information on this. Actually, no, I have a quote. And then we're going to have more information. And this is from Ryan Thomas, the spokesperson for Not One Penny, who's been talking about this a lot. General Motors, they said, decision to gut its workforce epitomizes the bad corporate behavior Republicans in Congress have incentivized for generations. Instead of using its massive tax savings to increase employee wages or invest in its workforce, GM is shuttering plants and cutting jobs to increase profits and further enrich shareholders. The American people will not forget the Republicans in Congress permitted these morally reprehensible and irresponsible actions. That is an excellent quote there. And what's really representative of what's been happening. Because again, this isn't something that is new. This has been happening quite a lot when it comes to manufacturing. Oh, we're going to retool, we're going to restructure, we're going to get rid of these jobs, and we're going to switch over, and we're going to send our plants overseas, or we're going to send them to Mexico, or start sourcing parts from China. And they're doing that all in an effort to make more profit, when in reality, these companies were fairly profitable. Now, what's also interesting is these same companies, by the way, when they weren't profitable, when they were facing certain disaster, who bailed them out? Well, it wasn't the shareholders that bailed them out. No, it was the United States government. It was you and me. It was us taxpayers. So GM is basically repaying what we did, saving their ass with letting go of a bunch of people, closing plants, and then moving production to Mexico. And on top of that, of course, not only on top of the bailouts, but they also received tax cuts to the tune of $500 million. Now, look, I'm not going to blame this solely on Trump, although there is a contributing factor related to Trump. You had the massive tariffs, right? And that's one thing that GM could point to and say, well, look, our profit margins, yes, are still pretty decent. We're still doing good as a company, but our profit margins aren't doing very well. And there's a couple of different reasons why they're saying that they are cutting down on these. For one, bad sales, poor sales on some of these car models. And Americans wanting to go and buy more trucks and SUVs, but also the steel tariffs that have cost them a lot of money. Nonetheless, critics say that the company's huge profits and financial assistance from the government over the past several years should have left GM capable of keeping its workforce intact. And it's true. In addition to the financial windfall it enjoyed thanks to the GOP tax cuts, GM has been given a total of $50 billion in government funds of the past decade as the U.S. sought to bail out the company. Following that bailout, of course, the company did very well, and it actually is still doing very well, despite poor sales of certain cars. See, smaller cars are not doing so well in America, as I explained before, so they're switching production over to trucks. Now, as I'm going to say, go to a quote here from somebody who was in one of the cities, in one of the towns where there was a GM plant. The GM plant is going to close. Why they couldn't just substitute one production model for another? Well, I'm going to go to that. But first, I'm going to tell you how much the company's actually made. The company has earned, according to Not One Penny, $6 billion in the first 3 quarters of 2018. That's in revenue. CEO Mary Barra has received $22 million in compensation last year. That's nearly 300 times the average salary of the regular GM employee. So what they're doing is they're saying, look, we have to downsize and eliminate car lines and factories that aren't popular. Which means basically it translates over into, we're going to kill your job. We're going to kill your job. All while at the same time saying we have to give our executive $22 million in compensation for 1 year. But wait, couldn't you have used a lot of that money to actually save those jobs? Not only that, but of course they do massive stock buybacks, as did most of the companies that benefited from the Trump tax cuts. So don't tell us that you're a struggling company. No, get out of here. But the other part about that is, look, this is more proof that trickle-down economics doesn't work. If you give more tax cuts to the rich and corporations, but don't actually increase consumer demand for your products, then they're not going to create more jobs. Why would they? No, they're just going to continue to funnel money into the executives' pockets and the shareholders, because that's what they do. That's what any smart person would do in this market environment. So there is a problem with the market environment. Now, I'm not saying that GM shouldn't or can't restructure, and they can do whatever they want. But maybe, I don't know, we shouldn't be giving them $500 million in tax cuts to try to save jobs that they were going to kill anyway. And to go to that quote here, I was reading through some of the articles to get information for the story, right? And I go into a Huffington Post article. I talked to one of the workers in the Lordstown plant. Now, this guy is a Trump voter. Oh, Jeff, you shouldn't feel bad for Trump voters. Well, this is the reason that he voted for Donald Trump. He believed him when he said, I'm going to bring manufacturing back. Well, see, one of the things Donald Trump does is he lies. I pointed out how he lies all the time. So he goes to the rallies and he says, oh, Lordstown, I'm going to bring the manufacturing back. I'm going to bring the car factory back. I'm going to save your jobs. And actually, your jobs will be better. They'll pay better than ever before if you vote for me. And some people are like, well, look, we tried the Democrats already. Under Obama, we still had this problem. Even though Obama, to be fair, bailed out the auto industry. Well, our wages aren't going up. So I guess I'll just try this new guy who promises things are going to be better. Now, those same people are like, boy, I think we made a mistake. No kidding. Well, I could have told you that. But some people, I guess, have to learn the hard way. And it's really sad. But anyway, now the guy, going to his quote here, he said that he had hoped Chevy would repurpose that plant. Now, right now, that Ohio plant makes Chevy Cruises. I happen to drive one of those. I think they're nice little cars. But as I said before, the trend now for Americans is, I'm going to buy SUVs, I'm going to buy big trucks. Now, Chevy Silverado drives really well, or sells really well. So does a Chevy Blazer, right? Now, this guy's like, well, why can't they just make the Blazer here? They can repurpose the plant. We're all excited and eager to go to work. We want to work. We don't want to be laid off. So just, we know this car isn't selling well. Okay, it's fine. You can get rid of it. Sometimes things don't sell well. Just have us make something else, please. No, they're not going to do that. Instead, the company has announced that it would make the Blazer in Mexico. Why? Why would they do it in Mexico? Well, because it saves money. They're going to save money on labor because they end up paying Mexican workers far, far less than they do American workers. It doesn't matter if you cut taxes for these companies. They're still going to find a place where labor is cheap. They're still going to find a way to enrich their shareholders. So maybe in the meantime, we should stop handing out corporate welfare. We should stop handing out tax cuts like they're candy. I mean, look, it doesn't work. How many more instances do we have to show you that tax cuts don't work, they don't create more jobs, and they really don't create an incentive for companies to stay? I mean, look, we did it for Carrier, right? Trump did it for Carrier. Where's Carrier go? Carrier is still going out overseas. They did it for a bunch of companies. And every time it's happened, I've had to report that they're still cutting jobs because tax cuts do not create economic growth. Tax cuts do not make companies stay in areas. It just does not trickle down. It will never trickle down. You know what? Instead of giving corporate welfare, you know what we should do? We should take that money and invest it in education. We should invest it in healthcare. We should invest it in a Green New Deal or a job guarantee plan instead of giving rich CEOs more and more cash who will end up turning their backs on their workers anyway, because that's more profitable for the shareholders. It's more profitable for the company. We have a sick, sick corporate culture that incentivizes short-term profits over everything else, over long-term growth, over what's good for the community. There are no ethical corporations anymore, at least not the big ones. Google used to be, they used to have this slogan of do no evil. They're doing evil now. Amazon, you don't want to get me started on Amazon. These big companies should not get these giant tax cuts because of what they're doing. The corporate culture is broken, and I don't know how to fix it, but I do know that we should stop giving them our money. Okay. I think that's fair. Moving on. All right. Fox News contributor Tommy Lauren again proves that she is garbage. On Monday night, she tweeted out that the use of tear gas on immigrants was the highlight of her Thanksgiving holiday. Yeah. So right now, there have been reports that we have used tear gas against some people in the migrant caravan who are camped out in Tijuana right now. A lot of them are waiting for their asylum claims to be approved or rejected. So they're waiting on asylum. And, well, during that time, a few of them decided they wanted to try to go into the United States illegally. Now, it takes a pretty desperate person to try and do that. That, of course, prompted the Border Patrol to start firing tear gas indiscriminately at the crowd. This delighted Tommy Lauren to no end. And she said on Twitter, "Bum rushing the border is a choice and has consequences. Watching the USA finally defend our borders was the highlight of my Thanksgiving weekend." Now, what kind of a shit person considers gassing people who are incredibly desperate to get into the United States, to get out of Honduras, the highlight of their weekend? I was sitting there, I was eating turkey and watching football, and then I decided that I would switch the channel and see what's going on with the news, and I was so delighted to see these young women and children and men getting gassed by our Border Patrol. Oh, it was so great. Pass me the pumpkin pie, man. Disgusting. But look, here's the thing. Her language, so, they're bum rushing. Well, of course, if you hear that with no context and you don't know what happened, you're going to think, well, bum rush. Well, they had it coming then. You're coming after our trip, our Border Patrol. Well, then you had to have had it coming, right? But that's what people like Tommy do. They get paid a lot of money to spew vitriol and excuse using tear gas on people that are desperately running for their lives. And it's funny, conservatives always wonder, well, if America's so bad and if America's so racist, then, well, why do these people keep trying to come here? Well, I have an answer to that. For one, look, I actually don't think that most of America is racist. I think that there is a very vocal racist minority that you hear a lot of. And it would be good if they shut up, but of course they never will. But for one, look, we have a lot of issues in this country. I point them out. But it's certainly better than the situation right now in Honduras and El Salvador. And I'm specifically going to go and talk about what's going on in Honduras and some of the other countries, of course, that these migrants come from as well, are involved in the U.S. drug war. And there's a lot of gang violence, there's a lot of drug violence, there's a lot of governmental corruption, but Honduras is especially bad. And so, because in 2009, they had a violent coup that overthrew their democratically elected leader. Now, this leader actually was a leftist, right? Now, he was President Zelaya. And during his tenure, he raised the minimum wage, provided free school lunches, milk for children, pensions for the elderly, and additional scholarships for students. And he also built new schools, subsidized public transportation, and even distributed energy-saving light bulbs. So this was your leftist leader in Honduras. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? Even though I'm a wealthy person myself, I'm going to be kind of like FDR. And I'm going to go and I'm going to try to make life better for regular people, regular Hondurans. Now, there are people that didn't like that. And that was wealthy people and, of course, the military and the wealthy elite. And like that, and they used military might to overthrow the left-leaning government to create a right-wing dictatorship. That right-wing dictatorship, by the way, kind of backed by the United States. Or at least, we didn't speak out against it. The leader of the coup, by the way, General Romero Vasquez Velasquez, was actually a graduate of the notorious School of the Americas, a U.S. Army training program nicknamed the School of Assassins for the sizable number of graduates who have engaged in coups, as well as the torture and murder of political opponents. So we train these people to go and take over and overthrow democratically elected governments in South America. That's what we did. Now, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, by the way, played a role in supporting and legitimizing that dictatorship and did not speak out against it. Now, it's not like we were specifically explicitly supporting that coup, but we didn't do anything about it. We're like, yeah, whatever. Sure, well, let's even open up relations with the, the military dictatorship in Honduras. Now, the results of that, of course, were disastrous for regular people in Honduras. Left-leaning activists and trade unionists and regular Hondurans who are not wealthy or militarily connected or left-wing. Well, of course, they got crushed, right? And then you have rampant poverty, you have violence. And so that's why these people come to the United States. That's why. The reason that they're fleeing their country is a situation that we at least kind of in an indirect way created. So they're going to the one place where they think, look, maybe I have some sort of opportunity, even though, Donald Trump, and even though they're not very friendly to migrants, we've got to get the hell out of here. At least we'll be safer in America. And of course, we're supposed to have compassion here. We're supposed to be the people that take in refugees and, asylum seekers and give them a chance to start a new life, a better life, or at least to be safe or safer until their country is at least safe enough for them to go back home. Or they can, stay here, become at least residents and build businesses and try to build some sort of life. But instead of being compassionate, we've got people like Tommy Lauren. I mean, they show the world how vicious we Americans can actually be. I mean, look, speaking of Tommy, who celebrates children being gassed? Well, Tommy does. Right-wingers. Now, they said that, according to the AP, some of the protesters tried to enter the country illegally, sparking the use of the tear gas. Hey, here's an idea. Why don't you let those people in illegally and then arrest them and then send them back? Say, if you're going to, if you want to apply for asylum, you can't just come in. No, you have a process. Let's do that process. Now, look, the Trump administration has been trying to sabotage that process. Of course they have. But there's not a whole lot you can do under the Trump government. Now, that said, if you're going to try to actually bum rush the border, it's not a good idea, right? That's not justification, though, for shooting tear gas at them. People like Tommy and right-wingers are literally saying, oh, they had it coming, and then celebrating when we actually use disproportionate force against these people. Oh, but Jeff, you don't understand. They threw rocks at our heavily armed border troops. Well, how effective is a rock versus a heavily armored soldier? Not very effective. No, let them cross the border, arrest them, send them back. For the people who try to get in. For the others who are waiting for asylum, that is a completely 100% legal process that you can't just fire tear gas at them for doing. You can't fire tear gas at people for protesting either. I mean, look, the majority of migrants, by the way, affected by the tear gas on Sunday were not among those who were throwing rocks or trying to cross illegally into the United States. So they just gassed a bunch of people exercising a legal right to request asylum. You know what that makes us? That makes us the criminals. That's not the migrants that are peacefully protesting or trying to get asylum. We are the criminals here. But Tommy, of course, she doesn't care. She doesn't care if it's legal or not. She thinks that, no, we're right, they're brown, and we're white. So they're trying to get into our country. That's an invasion. We should be able to defend ourselves. She doesn't see that they deserve basic humanity. And last week, she attacked people for actually daring to have empathy for these people. She said, notice these bleeding heart Hollywood liberal types who want to open the floodgates for illegals will never actually feel the impact. It's the average people outside of the fancy gated communities that have to deal with this crap. That's funny coming from someone like Tommy, who likely lives in those gated communities. I'm just saying. But how shit of a person do you have to be to make fun of people for having empathy for other human beings? Oh, right, we already know. Look, immigrants commit less crimes than native-born Americans, right? And oftentimes, they actually work harder and start businesses and actually create jobs. Is that the kind of crap Tommy doesn't want to deal with? No. No. What it is that people like Tommy are rewarded for saying these things by getting lots of money and attention from angry white people. These angry white people feel like they're losing their sense of entitlement due to the browning of America. Now, those people, they're not the silent majority. No, in reality, they're the extremely loud and fearful minority. They're full of such fear from all this Fox News right-wing propaganda about immigrants and about migrants. And they've been whipped up into a frenzy. And so what we've got to do is we have got to dispel that fear with facts. At the end of the day, facts matter. And they're stronger than the strongest propaganda. And ultimately, I think people are good people. Americans are good people. We do have empathy. We do care. And that's why this has, of course, prompted massive backlash among a majority, I think, of Americans who see these people not as a threat, but as people just like them who are trying to build a better life for themselves. So at the end of the day, Tommy's bullshit propaganda just shows how terrible a person she is. And at the end of the day, I think her side is definitely going to lose. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We got more stories, including a Fox News host who thinks pepper spray tastes good on your nachos. We'll come back with that story. Make sure to give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Super chats, I've got a couple of those I'll read after the break. And stay right there. We'll be right back. Around the Nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation, Jeff Waldorf here. Got a couple of super chats that I want to read here. One's from Carol Schneider. She says, love your commentary and never watch mainstream media, even though I'm in the older generation. Well, thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate that. Let me tell you, I've met some really awesome members of the older generation. Like my grandma, and this isn't in-laws or anything like that. My grandma's fucking woke. She is, of course, a progressive. She's a Bernie Sanders supporter. So pro-union, all that stuff. So members of the older generation, look, I think some of them do get a bad rep from some of the shittier members of your generation. And, you know, there's a lot of you that are doing a lot of good and should not be discounted. And people who've been fighting the fight longer than I think a lot of us have. So thank you for that. And Tira says, I appreciate your work. Thank you. Support you on Patreon, but I'm still super chat to keep the show going. Thank you for helping me be an informed citizen. Well, thank you for watching and thank you for supporting. I really appreciate that a great deal. That helps out more than you know. And the words of encouragement too are just amazing. So thank you guys. I really do have the best audience in the world. So thank you so much. All right. If you haven't already, please give us a like and share out the stream as well. And we'll head up to the next couple of stories here. But I do want to, there was something that I read earlier here before the break, I should say during the break. And this was from, let's see, let me go back here. Just let me find that comment here. Thought I had it. Hold. I know I'm close. And no, I can't seem to find that. There's something about how I can be so positive. No, I don't know. But yeah, look, I can be positive because I do see the good in people. I do see the good in our country along with the bad. And so you never have to, like, or I should say you always have to make sure to never let the bad outweigh the good. Even though it seems like everything is falling apart and everything is shit. And look, I read enough stories to understand that, but I also see regular people and how they interact, and I see regular people, and I see regular people doing a lot of good in their communities. And so that never makes the news because, well, I mean, who wants to report on people doing good things? Doesn't get any clicks, doesn't get any revenue, doesn't get any traffic, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. And so that's kind of what keeps me positive, is looking more local and seeing good people doing good things on a local level. And even sometimes they make it in a national level, and that's great too. Yeah, I can see the ugly too. I see what you did there. All right, guys. Let's move on. More disaster. More border-related disaster. Let's dive in. Okay. Now, Fox News is pretty much Trump state media, and they are in damage control over the administration's human rights debacle that happened on the border. Now, on Sunday, Border Patrol agents fired tear gas on migrants seeking asylum after a small splinter group attempted to enter the country illegally. Now, that tear gas ended up hitting peaceful migrants who were not trying to enter the country, who were trying to get their asylum claims processed, which is legal, 100% legal. You know what isn't legal? Firing tear gas on people who are not committing any crime. That makes you the criminal. Now, the Trump administration, of course, is now attempting to defend itself after receiving massive criticism for this illegal act. So here's Fox News bringing on people to try to minimize the impact of the gas. Now, this is Ron Coburn, who's president of the Border Patrol Foundation, and he's going to talk to Steve Doocy of Fox and Friends. Let's take a look.
There was a small hole they were able to puncture through the border wall, and they hurled all sorts of rocks, etc., at the Border Patrol agents, and then they fired the tear gas. Is that warranted?
Absolutely. And to clarify, the type of deterrent being used is OC pepper spray. It's literally water, pepper, with a small amount of alcohol for evaporation purposes. It's natural. You could actually put it on your nachos and eat it. So it's a good way of deterring people without long-term harm.
Pepper spray. It's just a harmless deterrent. You can even put it on your nachos. I do it all the time. Well, let's get to how harmless it is in a few minutes. But first, if it is so harmless, Mr. Colburn, well, why don't you demonstrate to the Fox News audience how awesome it is to get pepper sprayed and how minimal it is in actual harm? Or better yet, maybe you should put some on your nachos. Make your point for you, right? A little cheese, a little hamburger, a little pepper spray, maybe some guac. Did they actually put guac on nachos? I don't know. All I do is I put cheese on my nachos. I'm straight cheese. But I mean, come on. If it's safe, eat it. Why don't you show us how awesome it is to put it on your nachos? Actually, don't do that because it's actually not safe. Experts say that it could be very dangerous for human exposure, let alone human consumption. Now, the article says that this is from the Huffington Post. It wasn't immediately clear whether pepper spray was used in conjunction with the tear gas. Which, by the way, I don't know. All I knew is that they fired tear gas. Well, you definitely don't want to put that on your nachos either. You don't want to put any of that on your nachos. But nonetheless, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol did not respond to an inquiry when they asked. So this guy might have even had his gases confused. Great. Now, Sven Erik Hjort, an associate professor of anesthesiology, pharmacology, and cancer biology at the Duke University School of Medicine, says about this pepper spray and about this quote, I'm very concerned that Mr. Colburn has misrepresented the potential harms from pepper spray and tear gas. He said, yes, the burning, painful ingredient in pepper spray, capsaicin, is of natural origin distilled from chili peppers. However, capsaicin is used at several thousand-fold higher concentrations in the spray. It would never be used at these concentrations on food. So maybe you feel like really watered it down, maybe you could put it on your food. Maybe. But that wouldn't be a good idea either way. Now, he also says that at high concentrations, capsaicin is especially dangerous for children because of their small lungs. Obvious. The elderly and people with respiratory diseases such as asthma, bronchitis, and the common cold. So those people are at risk. Now, part of that risk comes from the fact that pepper spray swells up your throat, along with, of course, giving you temporary blindness and the famous burning sensation in your eyes, nose, and mouth. Now, that sensation, of course, is supposed to deter people, but the swelling of the throat could actually end up being lethal in some circumstances. In fact, there are some studies that show that certain situations involving pepper spray can result in severe effects. For example, if a person has an allergy to any of the ingredients in the pepper spray, has asthma, or has a pre-existing heart condition, then the effects of pepper spray may be more severe and in some cases may lead to death. And of course, there are instances of inmates in prison, for example, being pepper sprayed that ended up dying. So no, we're not going to use it on nachos. It's not a good idea. It's not perfectly safe, and you should not use it on your food. And you know what else you shouldn't use it on? Peaceful protesters and asylum seekers. And neither should tear gas, by the way. Tear gas is actually banned from the battlefield because it's considered a chemical weapon. And look, the other reason, of course, is well, you can't tell if it's an actual chemical weapon that's being used on the battlefield, so we're just going to save it for domestic use. Lovely. But look, the whole conversation on Fox News is devoid of facts, as it should be, because the whole purpose is geared to minimize what is actually a massive human rights violation that just happened on our southern border. It is indefensible what has happened, going after young women, children, gassing them with, tear gas. And I don't know if they used pepper spray or not. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But nonetheless, Fox is going to go and defend this situation. Because at the end of the day, look, they know who butters your bread, right? They know the president himself is watching. They know it. And they also know that their base is hordes of angry white people that look for any excuse to hurt brown people, people who look differently than them, because of all the fear-mongering done by places like Fox News. It is a vicious cycle of fear, anger, hatred, which leads to tremendous ratings for Fox News. But it also leads to tragedies like what we see every day on the border against people of color, against Latinos, against black people, against immigrants, against migrants, and against anybody who is not straight, white, Christian, and most likely a man. That's what it's all about, folks. It's gross. Okay. Moving on. We've got climate news. Now, recently, the Trump administration released a climate report. They actually did so on Friday, just one day after Thanksgiving, on Black Friday, where news stories essentially go to die. But, of course, this is a story that won't die, that will never die, and it shouldn't because of how important it is. Now, Trump himself, on that report, released by his own administration, which says there will be massive consequences due to climate change, said this about it. Watch.
I've seen it, I've read some of it, and it's fine. Yeah, I don't believe it. No, I don't believe it. And here's the other thing. You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, addresses our country. Right now, we're at the cleanest we've ever been, and that's very important to me. But if we're clean, but every other place on earth is dirty, that's not so good. So I want clean air, I want clean water, very important.
I don't believe it, but I want clean air, clean water. Very, very important to me. Plus, everybody else is dirty. We're the cleanest. Really, we're the cleanest? I mean, we're tremendously clean. Nobody can be as clean as we are. No, that's not true. In fact, the American Lung Association's 2018 State of the Air report found that ozone pollution had worsened significantly due to warmer temperatures, while particle pollution continued to improve in both 2014 and 2016. Now, that doesn't make us the cleanest. We're not the cleanest. We're not the worst either. But we're definitely not the cleanest. We're somewhere in the middle. Now, the 19th Annual National Air Quality Report Card actually found, and this is disastrous, that 133.9 million Americans, more than 4 in 10, lived in counties with unhealthful levels of either ozone or particle pollution in 2014 through 2016, placing them at risk for premature death and other serious health effects, such as lung cancer, asthma attacks, cardiovascular damage, and developmental and reproductive harm. So, not the cleanest. And that, by the way, was still under President Obama, a Democratic administration. Now, under Trump, we've consistently deregulated industry, eliminated regulations on the environment, and as I said before, on industry pollution. Not only that, but we pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. So it's very likely that those numbers are actually worse under Donald Trump, that we have actually dipped in the ratings. We're still, of course, not the dirtiest. I think that does apply to Asia and India and places like that that are still developing. But look, China, I got to mention China as well. China is now one of the leading producers of solar panels. So they're actually trying to fix that and trying to do something about climate change, because every other country in the world, all of their leaders can see that this is a problem. So no, we're not the worst, but we're definitely not the best. And to say that, well, everybody else is dirty. Well, maybe if you think that way, wrongly so, but if you think that way, well, then maybe you should think, well, America can be a leader. It's not, well, if everybody else is dirty, why not we? Why can't we be dirty too and fuck up the rest of the world? No, you should actually be a leader and say, hey, you know what? We're going to set an example for you guys, and then we're going to use our economic might to do the right thing and actually try to steer the world towards something better. Hey, guess what? We had something like that. It was called the Paris Climate Agreement. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, here's the thing. It's not just about air quality, by the way, which I assume that's what Trump's talking about. We're the cleanest. We're the greatest, right? It's about the amount of carbon dioxide we're putting into the atmosphere, as well as methane and other greenhouse gases, right? Those are what's driving climate change. But the report he was referring to, which was produced by scientists from 13 different federal agencies, concluded that the United States would warm by at least 3 more degrees by 2100 unless the use of fossil fuels was dramatically curtailed by the United States and, of course, the rest of the world. But the United States is also really important because, as I said before, we can actually be a leader on this issue. Now, there was an earlier report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, that report came out in October, and it basically said the same things. We have a massive problem. Man-made climate change, man-made global warming is changing the climate, and we have to do something major, or else it's going to have massive impacts, not just on the climate, but also on the world economy. Now, they said that they need to reduce global emissions of CO2 by 45% from 2010 levels by the year 2030, and reduce coal use to almost zero, and use up to 7 million square kilometers, that is 2.7 million square miles for land energy crops. Now, of course, the Trump administration is like, no, I don't believe that report. And guess what? I don't even believe our own report. Now, the same report from the Trump administration also connected climate change to other environmental issues, like record-breaking wildfires and storms, and warned of negative effects on the economy and American livelihoods. And they said, without substantial and sustained global mitigation and regional adaptation efforts, climate change is expected to cause growing losses to American infrastructure and property and impede the rate of economic growth over this century. So more economic harm, along with more storms, stronger storms, more fires, more terrible conditions. Not to mention, we have an issue with human migration. So look, we don't even need to go to 2100 to see the impacts. It's happening right now. It's right in front of our faces. California is literally burning on fire. And so how much do you think that costs the taxpayer? Hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Both to fight the fires and to rebuild after them. How much have we spent on hurricanes? Trying to fix the damage from those. Now, look, I care about people. I care about the environment. But some people, let's be honest, they can't see past their own pocketbook. And I got news for them. Climate change is going to cost you guys money. Far more money than setting up a system of clean, renewable sources of energy. Sure, it'll be a transition. But in the end, we'll end up actually having more jobs, higher paying jobs, cleaner jobs. That'll help the economy. So if all you care about is economic growth, is the economy, then why wouldn't you be in favor of a Green New Deal that promises to create more jobs, better paying jobs, than I'm pretty sure the people that are working in a coal mine right now would rather have a higher paying, better job in solar. It definitely saves on that whole black lung thing, which I'm sure is very uncomfortable and not cool to have. But see, Trump and the government under the Republicans are not interested in that because they get money from fossil fuel companies. The GOP gets millions and millions of dollars in legal campaign bribes, campaign contributions from fossil fuel companies. And of course, they all talk about let's have more fossil fuels, let's dig more coal, let's do more oil pipelines, let's do more gas pipelines. You know, I have a it was like a cousin or something that works in pipelines. They leak all the time, by the way. That's environmental damage. They leak, and again, the methane that gets burned when they, or that gets released when they use that as a fuel also exacerbates climate change. Now, I would hate to see him lose his job, but at the same time, I'd actually want him to get something better in, not in fossil fuels, but in clean energy, better energy. Stuff that is renewable and not dangerous. He was telling me a story over the Thanksgiving holiday of where somebody dug in the wrong spot, hit a pipeline, and they saw the explosion from blocks from miles away. The man was instantly incinerated, as well as everything around him. And we continue to use that form of energy, even though we don't have to. We just don't have to. So, look, here's the thing. The people that run these companies, oil and gas companies, and the people that they buy off in government, they don't care about your health and safety, right? They don't care about if your home gets burnt down in a wildfire, that drier conditions, thanks to all the carbon they've already put into the atmosphere previously, because it's all cumulative. It all adds up. They don't care if your home gets burnt down by that. They don't care. They don't care if your home gets flooded by the floods that are going to happen. They don't care if a hurricane blows it away. They don't care. They don't care. Why? Because ExxonMobil gave them millions of dollars in legal bribes. Now, maybe they'd care if we gave them a bribe. Until then, they tell us to piss off. We don't care about you. And it's true. And Republicans are saying the same thing. Piss off. Unless you're giving us checks for millions of dollars to do the right thing, we don't care. Most of them are not going to live to that, to the age of where climate change has the most disastrous effects. I mean, look, most of them are old, wealthy, white people who are not going to be impacted by these effects, which is really sad. And look, if you're rich, you can buy your own firefighters to save your house. Or just buy another. I mean, silly poor people, come on. Why don't you just buy another house? Why don't you buy money? No, here's the thing. Climate change is happening. It's devastating. And it's going to get worse. Now, Trump may or may not believe that it's actually happening. And I don't know. I don't know what he believes. And I don't really care. Because right now, the truth speaks for itself. And the only question here now is how many people Republicans are going to end up hurting with their policies before the voters finally get back into reality and face what's actually happening. Okay. One more story, and it is enraging. Let's go to that. Police in Alabama are now trying to blame a shooting victim for having a legal firearm. Now, on Thanksgiving, police officers in Birmingham, Alabama, or at least a suburb of that City responded to reports of shots being fired at a local mall. It's the River Chase Galleria Mall. Now, that ended up with one man being killed by police officers who had responded to the scene. Now, that man was 21-year-old E.J. Bradford. Now, E.J. Bradford actually had nothing to do with the original shooting that they responded to. Now, according to reports, two young men began fighting inside the mall. One man drew a gun and shot an 18-year-old man twice and shot a 12-year-old girl. Now, as far as I know, those people did survive, but the 21-year-old E.J. Bradford, who was not involved in that original altercation, was killed. Now, why? What happened? Well, let me get into more of the details here. Now, during the fight, one of the males produced a handgun, shot the other male twice in the torso. Two uniformed Hoover police officers providing security at the mall were in close proximity. They heard the gunshots. While moving towards the scene, one of the officers encountered a suspect brandishing a pistol and then shot him. Now, that suspect, quote unquote, was Amantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., or E.J. Bradford. Now, after that, HPD Captain Greg Rector described him as a armed shooter and basically said, we caught the guy. I mean, he had a gun. He was brandishing that weapon and he was close to the scene. So, you know what? We just shot him. We didn't ask any questions. We shot him. We killed him. We got him. We got him. No, turns out they didn't get him. And later on, they realized, oh my God, we got the wrong guy. In fact, the police admitted, after calling the officer who shot and killed Bradford a hero, and therefore, of course, saying that Bradford was the bad guy, he was the thug, right? He backtracked and said that Bradford was actually, yes, he was there and might have been involved in the altercation, maybe, but he was unlikely to be involved in the original incident. So the story has actually changed a couple of times. First, he was the shooter. Then they realized, oh, he's not the shooter. But he might have been involved in the altercation. And then, oh, yeah, we don't think he was involved in the altercation at all. He was just, oops. In fact, Bradford, by the way, according to his father, who was a retired jail supervisor, by the way, Bradford was fully licensed to have the gun. So it is very likely, or is very possible, that Bradford was actually attempting to be the good guy with the gun that you hear so much about. The NRA, of course, is like, oh, well, you know, it takes a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun. Well, Bradford was a good guy with a gun, and so it's very likely that he was rushing towards the scene to be the good guy with the gun and to stop the bad guy. But he was stopped by police first and fatally shot. So, that is, look, what happens when that good guy happens to be black in this case, right? Again, they tell us all the time, NRA, you got to be the good guy with the gun, right? Rush in, save your fellow Americans. You'll be a hero. Well, not unless you're black. This is the same kind of story as Jamil Robertson, right? Jamil Robertson chased down a gunman at a bar in Chicago while he was on duty as a security guard. He was a good guy with the gun. And what happened to him? Police shot and killed him too, because they thought for some reason he was the bad guy. Well, apparently, to police, you can't both be a good guy with a gun and also be a black man. And unfortunately, that's what happens. Now, yesterday the cops released a statement now saying that, oh, well, look, he had the gun. He was brandishing the gun, so what could we do? He said, we can say with certainty Mr. Bradford brandished a gun during the seconds following the gunshots, which instantly heightened the sense of threat to approaching police officers responding to the chaotic scene. Well, he had a gun. He was black, he had a gun. We just assumed that he was the shooter. So what did we do? We instantly shot and killed him. Whatever happened to police drop your weapon? You see that in movies all the time, right? Apparently movies do not echo real life, because in there, the police actually give you time to say, I'm not the shooter. I didn't kill anybody. I was trying to do something good. And brandished. What do they mean by brandished? He was holding the gun. Apparently, holding a gun as a black man is brandishing. They said that it instantly heightened the sense of threat. Yeah, he's a black guy with a gun. Of course you're going to have an instantly heightened sense of threat. I wonder if they had that same sense if it were a white guy. No, you know what? We already know the answer to that. There are numerous times where there is a white person with a gun that ends up just getting arrested. And sometimes they take him to Burger King or McDonald's to go and get a meal. White guy with a gun just did, killed people. Oh, let's take you out for food. I mean, you're not that dangerous, right? Whereas black men, 2 seconds, they're dead. They're dead. So, look, these stories say two things to me, right? So, for one, if you're black, you're always considered a threat, whether or not you have a legal gun. You're always a threat to police. And number two, the idea of the good guy with the gun is horseshit. Because again, how are police officers supposed to know who is the good guy with the gun here when everybody is armed? And of course, as usual, the fear-mongering from the NRA and the promotion of this narrative about good guys with guns ends up getting black men killed. And if you think the NRA is going to defend these guys, well, guess what? They're not. They don't talk about Jamil Robertson. They're not going to talk about E.J. Bradford, just like they ignored Philando Castile. All of them were black men, legal gun owners. They had their permit. They were exercising their Second Amendment rights. They were still murdered by police officers who considered them a threat. I wonder why they were considered threatening. Well, if you have a situation where the white man with a gun who ends up getting arrested and not shot, whereas you have the same situation where one of the people with the gun ends up being a black person and it ends up completely differently, you can kind of guess what's going wrong here, what the theme here is, what the central issue is, right? Look, Ronald Reagan in California. You know, California didn't have tough gun control laws until Reagan. Why? It's because there were black people exercising their Second Amendment rights. They are afraid of armed black people. And ironically, the NRA uses that same fear of armed black people to sell guns to scared white people. It is about racism. There is a lot of racism in this story. But of course, it's not just about that. It's also about easy access to weaponry. And it's also about police training. Why are they considered a threat? Why are black people considered more threatening than white people? It's not because they commit the majority of crimes. No, white people, black people actually commit crimes at about the same rates. But they are incarcerated and arrested far more than white people are, which is kind of strange when you think about it. Wonder why that is. Could be that maybe we have some systemic racism left in this country that targets black men. Probably. Look, I don't even know what to say to black people to protect themselves against this. What, don't get a gun? Well, we've already seen situations where even if you don't have a gun, you are still shot and killed. How many times have black men been shot and killed even when they're unarmed? Sometimes within seconds. Or shooting you for even having a cell phone. I mean, come on. It is a no-win situation if you're a minority in America and you end up having an encounter with a police officer. Now, look, do we need police training? Of course, we need police accountability. We need police training. I think we need to have police forces that more represent the community that they're supposed to protect. And we need that, and we need to demilitarize the police And I think we do need common sense gun regulation. You reduce the number of guns in the country, and police maybe aren't going to be so, I don't know, afraid. But that still won't solve the ultimate problem here, is that there is a deep-seated inherent bias against black people, where there are just people who are just more afraid of black people and see them more as a threat. Now, it would help if, of course, police officers, or I should say police departments, didn't hire white supremacists. But as we've seen, there are racists and white supremacists that actively go into law enforcement. So that's another issue. And so there are a lot of different factors here that need to be dealt with when dealing with this issue. It is not one thing. It's not just one thing. It is a variety of things. But what I can tell you is that it's extremely dangerous to be a black man in America. And reading these stories, man, you would never think someone who looks like me. We never deal with these problems. But just because we don't deal with them, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. And it doesn't mean they're not destroying this community. And so we've got to do something about it, because at the end of the day, it's not going away on its own. And so we've got to stop this. We've got to start saving people's lives, and instead of taking them. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Thank you for the likes and shares, and for the super chats. Remember, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. You can help us out there. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TYTNation. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and urge everyone else to subscribe as well. So let's get this thing to 100,000. Let's get the Facebook page to 10,000, and let's keep on moving and spreading the progressive message. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, guys. We'll see y'all tomorrow.